master of the arcanum. Okay. So this is from Alexandra, and her biggest concern was being able to get some of the red out of the face. Her client felt like it was really flushed. So she wanted to just kind of pull some of the red tones out of the complexion. For me, once I start editing, if they're past their first couple of years in the 20s, you'll start to see little signs of aging on their face. And I think it's really important to learn the difference between age lines and expression lines, because you can take age lines out and make them look younger. But if you take the expression lines out, that's when they start to look like plastic Barbie dolls. And the other thing is that you don't want to completely take away all signs of aging, because then it doesn't look like them. And I think that there's a certain level of grace and dignity that comes with aging that younger faces don't have. So they have like that flawless, youthful glow and beauty, but there's a sense of dignity that I see in a lot of the women that are between like 30s and above that you just don't see in the younger girls. So I never want to take all the lines out, but I'm gonna go through and just edit a bunch of this stuff and keep going just so you can see the different steps along the way and decide where you want to take it. It's going to be difficult for me too to not edit in my usual style, but one of the things that you can definitely do is go over to your channels here and select on your reds, and you can pull down specifically from your reds, greens, and blues. I taught myself on Facebook, so I actually didn't know that you could break down the channels like that when I started. And if you look at a lot of my earlier work, I'm a big fan of desaturated tones. So a lot of times you can pull it out just by desaturating. So one of the easiest ways that I'll do that, hang on. Why isn't it? Hang on one second. Let me pull that up again. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that. So I will go in a lot of the time and play with the color in the black and white too. And this is where a lot of my style comes in, because I'm always shooting in desaturated tones. So she did this with hers when she was looking at it and sent it. This is pretty close. Hers had a little bit more, she was a little more towards the greens, I think, in the image that she put in. But with that sepia tone, when you're going in and you're playing with that, one of the things that you can do is you can pull the pinks and the reds right out of the color. Now, on the downside, where we do want to do that with the flesh tone, you don't want to lose it with the hair. So a lot of times I'll go in, and if you're watching when I'm editing, a lot of times I'm putting tons of layers on and going through and selecting what it is that I want to keep the color of. So I'm loving on the strawberry blonde hair, so I'll go in, and you can do this with masking tool, with masking instead of doing like layers on top of layers. But I do it this way because this was how I taught myself to do it, because I didn't know what any of the tools did when I first got Photoshop. So I'll go in and pull a lot of the color out, but then you can see the difference in the skin tones. Another thing that you can do when you're going through just for the thing is the color balance over here. You can go through and pull those colors out. So we're leaning away from the reds and into more of the blues towards the greens, which I'm guessing is part of what she did, which is why her skin started to have that green kind of tone. And then you can pull them out of the midtones will just change everything. But again, you can see we're changing, like, got rid of all of the pink now, but we're starting to look completely unrealistic. And we also don't want to pull the red tones out of everything else. So if you're going through either masking or selecting, whichever, I'll do like a really rough cut just over skin. And then go in and go over to the color balance. And so you can start to see where we selected. Again, it's looking really green now because you're pulling all of the color out, which I'm guessing is part of what she was struggling with. But because we have just the skin selected, and I did a really rough edit, you can see like all the green getting pulled into her hair. But let's say for the sake of argument that we wanted to keep her green because we didn't like her and she was a terrible client. You could go in then, and then with, I'm always at 0% hardness with my eraser. You could go in and just cut out around. And then it's attention to detail when you're color toning like that, because this is where, I mean, obviously I don't make them green, but this is where a lot of my color tonality that everybody's always saying they like in my images, I do a lot of this when I'm going through, and a lot of the believability comes in and just paying attention to the details. So if I'm trying to change her skin, one of the things that I want to do is make sure I'm paying attention to anything that isn't skin. So we'll go in. And I'm going super fast, so I'm hitting things that are skin. And I'm also doing, one of the other things I never do is I never ever am editing at, unless I'm at 100% so I can see what I'm doing. This looks really terrifying. But I wanted to show up on the screen while you guys are watching. So now, because her eyebrows are thin, we're picking up too much of the skin texture here. So that's where I would start to play with the opacity and bring it down, because you want enough that you're pulling that color from her hair back through and keeping that without getting the skin underneath. Same thing, I totally overstepped here. If I was doing it and doing it correctly when I'm going through and changing skin tones, I'm not hitting any of this on the outside of her eyelashes or the inside line here. I don't want any of that. So you can really see, it's interesting because of color theory, how much red is actually in her skin tone, because that's the unedited image. And it doesn't look that red when you're looking at the face because it's playing off of the hair and everything else, and so your eye sees it differently. But when you put a contrasting color that's on the other side of the color wheel in, now doesn't her skin look like hot pink, like Pepto-Bismol pink? So we can really see where all of the colors really are, which is a good point too. So you actually have a lot of control over how the image looks based on how you're dressing them and what colors are reflecting off of them. I'm going to go in and just touch up just a little bit of the eyebrows because they will pull the skin in from underneath. And then we'll go in and we'll take it down. So she looks super green right now, but if we go and we take that green down to like 40%, look at how much of that red we took out. Can you guys see that? Yeah. So then we'll go in and we'll grab both of these and merge them. Okay, and then I can go in and I can play with the color balance a little more on the whole image so that it blends in. And now I'm actually adding a little bit of the red back in because flesh tones do, like yellows and reds are the two things in flesh tones. So you want to keep it looking natural. But for me, where I'll pull it out the most is probably in the shadows. So I'll take it more towards blue and away from yellow. And then in the highlights, I want to pull it away from the red and more towards yellow. And also, like, one of the other things that's really kind of a no-brainer, but I think photographers and retouchers kind of shy away from is it's like trusting your camera to do the work for you. Like, they're actually really smart and the programs are really smart. So sometimes one of the best things to do is to actually go in and just play with the auto contrast and the auto color and the auto tone and see where it goes. Like, I don't like the tone added in because I think it makes her look pale, but I do like the auto tone. I don't like the auto color. I think the auto color is a little bit too blue. Now she kind of gave up on the image a little bit. Because she was having such a hard time with the colors. A lot of what she's getting is color cast from the sun and then her natural flesh tones picking that up. So I'm going to go through. Let's delete those and start again with the original. And I'm going to go through and just do a quick edit like it was an image I was working on. And then if you guys have questions, just drop me a line, say something, chat. Okay. So before I start working on color, I want to work on her actual skin texture. A couple of tools for that. If you're taking your time and going through, the healing tool's great. The patch tool, it's here or there with a patch tool for me. It depends on what you're doing. The healing brush is really good for fine lines. So we were talking about the difference between expression lines and age lines. These ones here are expression lines. She gets them because she's smiling, and because when you smile your cheeks get raised, it creates the creases in the sides, which is why the crow's feet are the first thing that show up in women in their age, because we smile with our whole faces. But these ones across the nose are indented age lines from expressions. So you'll get them when you furrow your brow and you're grumpy, and sometimes even when you smile really hard. And then what happens is, as we age, the elasticity in our skin doesn't work anymore, so those lines start to stay, and the older we get, the deeper set they get. So I like the healing brush just for... the spot healing brush, I'm sorry. Just for going over the fine lines and starting to minimize them. So you can see, like, this one's still in here, but it's not as pronounced as it was. The other thing that the spot healing brush is really good for is stray hairs. So if I come in and I decide that I want to take out just this one, following that line, the spot healing brush usually does a pretty good job of taking it out and sampling from around it. And this is really stupid, painstaking work. But you can see, like, we're going from flesh to hair, and it's going in the complete opposite direction. So you want to keep it just a little bigger. And then it depends on how much editing you're doing. So this is, we're only at 69%. So let's go up and find some stray hairs. So you can see, like, these ones are coming through. We'll come back down. 90% is good. So if I'm really spending time on an image because it's going into publication, or I really need to wow and impress, and they're spending thousands of dollars for me to make them look flawless. No matter how good your hairstylist is, especially if you're shooting outside, you're going to have problems with the stray hairs and the flyaways. So the spot healing brush is great for going up and healing, and you get very, very little blur. The more patience you have with this, the better, and I've found that it works better if you just work with small areas at once. So rather than trying to follow the hair all the way in and around like that, that's when you'll start to get, I don't know if you guys can see it, but you'll start to get like that smooth kind of blur where it doesn't quite line up. And if you take your time and you go with the grain, it has an easier time reading what's around it. And if you find that you're getting a lot of blur, sometimes the larger sampling brush actually works better. Okay, so see here how now I've cut the line here, which honestly this one would go too. But can you start to see like how the lines aren't quite lining up? That's where the healing brush works, because then you're sampling. So your option click for where you're going from, and then you can continue that down. And then again, it's just patience. Most of this is patience, and honestly most of it is stuff that I don't worry about. I won't usually go in and correct every single hair that's out of place, because if you talk to a professional retoucher that's doing magazine work, all of these lines are going, all of the hair is perfectly in place, it's all going in the same direction. This one would go, this one would go, this one would go. I don't pay attention to that level of detail because I don't think it's necessary, and I also think that it's not natural. So I want some of the stray hairs to go away. Like I would probably go and get rid of the ones that are just around the face. And definitely any that are cutting through the eyes. I always have stray hairs that are like right in front of the eyes. So you can go in and individually do it. The cloning brush is like touch and go too. The healing brush samples the texture and the color. So when you're on the healing brush itself, like if I want to pull down, it will sample the texture from here and the color from here. So if I took her hair, you can see how it's picking up the texture of the hair, but it's picking up the color of her flesh to mesh it in so that you have the same thing, which is good. Now, if we wanted to do the smooth and flawless skin and we were paying attention, then we might look at this area and see some of the splotchiness here and decide that we want to pull over. A lot of times though, you have to keep resampling from where you're at, otherwise you start to get patterns in it. So if I come from here, you know, you can start to see like, oh, and obviously you'd catch the eyebrows, but a lot of people, they're not paying attention to little things in the skin, like where the cells are and the direction of the skin. This one's a little soft, but if we wanted to go in, you can't sample from, say, the nose and try to fix these lines because the skin texture is different. So you can see it's going in a completely different direction and it swoops upwards here on the nose, whereas the eyes are going out. So it doesn't fit at all, even if the coloring lines up. The same thing, if you're looking at the pores, you can see how they stretch upward on the face here, which is not how they would look on the nose. So anytime that you're sampling, you want to be looking right nearby where you're looking. So if I want to start getting rid of these lines, and I'm doing that with the healing brush tool, if I'm getting rid of this line, then I want to be sampling as close as I possibly can to that actual skin texture to take it down. Same thing, like you can start to see it, like the pores in the nose are and the cheek are really small as they start to meet up with the nose, but then they stretch and they widen at her cheeks because of the skin elasticity. Say that 10 times. Same thing down here. So these are, they're expression lines, but they're also age lines. So if you look at children, when they smile, they usually have like the creases right here from under the cheekbone, and that's it. These ones start to show up later in life. So this is definitely one that I'll usually go in and touch out. And I'm also evening out the color. See how much just messing with the cheek and taking that little bit, because the sunlight hit it, anytime light hits anything, it'll focus on what is protruding, and then it creates shadow on what is falling back. So you get a lot of accentuation to curves, which can be good if you're looking for curves like cleavage lines, and we're showing off the figure. Then it can be really good to have the accentuation of the light. When you're talking about wrinkles or creases that are denoting any kind of overweight, then that's different. It won't be flattering. So taking that out really helps smooth, but it doesn't change the expression of her face. We still have the smile. On the other hand, if I took out these lines, these are expression lines. And so her face starts to look a little expressionless. Same thing. This one up here is deeper set because it's an expression line, but because she's been making that expression for her whole life, it's a much deeper crease than it was when she was like 20. And if I go through and take it out entirely, then the face stops making sense as you're doing it, because you would need to raise these muscles here in order for her to raise that eyebrow like she does. So if we go through and we kind of rough edit and get rid of all of the lines with the healing brush, same thing. These ones are big. A lot of people try to get rid of everything underneath the eyes to make them look young and fresh. And we're having, I'm really rough editing, so we're having a lot of discoloration because I'm not taking my time with it, but you get the general idea. If we're taking all of the lines out of her face, saying that we want to make her look younger, we've also gotten rid of a lot of the expression. So while yes, it does make the face look smoother and younger because there's no lines in it, you can see how much of her genuine expression that we lost too. So you want to keep the ones that are right here by the cheek. These ones always stay. And you want to keep some of the ones that are by the eyes. Now, for me, I'll soften these ones. So to give you a general idea, we'll go in and we'll just pull them back just a little. So she still has the lines. We're still seeing some of the expression going back and forth. But we don't want all of them. So you can see her, you can literally see her start to age as we're moving it up. But we also see less expression the quote-unquote younger we get. Does that make sense? So you want like a healthy blend of the two, really, is where we're getting at. All right, I'm just going to sit and play with it for a minute. Let's go through. Okay. So this is another way to edit and smooth out the skin, and this is becoming more and more popular. This is called frequency separation. So can you guys see, specifically, I think it shows up pretty well right here. You can see like the lines of her hair. And then here we can see the eyelashes. It's kind of gray. Okay, so what we have is we have our original image, and then we're making two copies. With the first copy, your background copy, go in. I don't do it because I know what I'm doing, but we'll say lower level. Upper level. Okay, so what we're doing with your lower level, you're going to start with your original and make two copies. With the lower level, you're just going to add a blur layer. And you just want it just enough to take out the details. So you can see around like the eyes and the eyelashes. It's just enough to soften the details of it. Then with your upper level, you're going to go in and you're going to go to Image, Apply Image, and then you'll select the lower level and you'll go to Subtract. And then what you're left with is essentially all of the texture. So it'll turn gray for you like this, and you'll be able to see just the detail and the texture. Then you're going to go over here, and you're going to take it to... Yeah. No, because I'm on the wrong one. Hang on. You're going to come over here. And you're going to go to linear light. So now, to you, looking at these layers, now that we made it linear light, this top and these two layers look exactly like the bottom layer. You shouldn't be able to see any difference. So it resharpens it for you. And then essentially what we did was we split all of the color on one layer and all of the texture on another layer. So looking at her skin, let's look at her forehead. See all of these little splotches? Those are all color blemishes. Well, actually, they're freckles. I would leave them in. But for the sake of argument, let's say we wanted to do porcelain skin. You would want to, this would be a color separation that you would be changing. Whereas these are texture lines. The hair is both because it's orange against the flesh tones and their hard lines. So if we come in here now and we'll use, for fast edit, we'll say we wanted to soften all that up. Essentially what you would be doing is going up to your filter. See how all of the color differentiation goes away? Now this is really over exaggerated. If you do this on the whole image, it'll look awful when it's done. But do you see how we lost all of the detail of the color? So I'm going to over exaggerate it so that it keeps it. But you'll notice when we start to do that down, say here, where we have lines, and the same thing, and Command F is the short key to redo the last filter that you did, so we'll go through And you just want to pick layers, little selections that are close to each other. So you can see, like, yeah, I got it. Right here, we could say that was one color thing because we're picking up a lot of the light, and then you can see it start to get darker here and start to get darker here behind her hair. So these are the kind of selections that you're looking for, but you're doing it at a much, much lower filter level. I have this at like 117 right now, which is ridiculous unless you really want that false skin. But you can see it's essentially taking all of the color out of the entire face. And blurring it. Am I going too fast for you guys? Okay. So we can pretty much agree that this does not look good. But the reason that I wanted to do it and do it so exaggerated was to show you that even though we're taking most of the color out, we're leaving the texture in. So you can still actually see all of the skin definition and the texture of the skin and the pores and lines. We haven't moved any of those or changed any of them. They're all left behind. In the same way, so we'll go through. Let me. You can start to see how you're doing that, and then it samples again because it's taking it and filtering it. So as you're going through, it's taking all of that out and just blending the colors together. Now that's really, really over exaggerated, but let's go in here in this little section and we'll go up to the filter. Okay, and we'll take it down, which it should be way down, to like, I'd say 3.5 is probably the highest you want to go. So it left all of the lines, but it softened all of the texture. So now we'll go into like her nose and we see like the H spots here and a little bit of discoloration. So if you go in and select this, and I would probably break that down even further because you want to follow the lines light. See how it just softened it? You can still see it, it's just taking it out. And then you can go through and decide where that spot is, where you're like, okay, that's too far, or that's just enough. So again, we're leaving all of the texture on the skin, so we're not getting that plastic look, but we're softening all of the color. And you don't want to do either to the extreme. The idea for this is just to fix any serious blotchiness you have. So if she has really uneven skin and we're trying to even it in, then this can be really helpful for fixing the color differences without damaging the texture of the skin and making it look plastic. So you can start to like blend in circles and even out the skin. And I'm just selecting them and I'm hitting Command F, which is going through and redoing the filter. And then if I need to do it a couple of times, if it doesn't disappear the way I want it to the first time in blend in, I can hit it 2, 3, 4 until it goes away. So this would be, oh, sorry. This would be a really good area for that because I don't want to lose all of the texture under her eyes, and this is a heavily textured area, but she's got that dark circle right there. You can go in and soften that and it'll help blend it in to the rest of her face, which helps make it stick. Same thing, these are actually just little mascara lines. And you can take them in. But again, you can see when we were over exaggerating it, the face looks ridiculous if it doesn't have color differentiation because now it's flat. She looks almost like a cartoon character and we see it over plasticized because you need that texture in the skin. You need those color differentiations for your eyes to see depth and to make it look three-dimensional. So when you take that away and you make it all the same color, there's no depth now. It looks flat. It looks 2D. So let's go in and undo it because it's ridiculous. Actually, let's just delete it and make a new layer because that'll be faster. Okay. So same thing. If I wanted to go in and select to get rid of the texture, let me find a good one. I wanted to go in and get rid of the lines, but I didn't want to get rid of the color, you can do the same thing. Now, I don't usually go in and edit the texture like this because it leaves, even if I'm trying to get rid of those lines, it leaves the texture sharp around everything else, and so this prints awfully when you get it done. So you can't, it only works one way for me. With that, because then what you're doing is you're creating these blur patterns where you don't have texture on the skin. So I want to leave as much of the texture in the skin as possible. So most of the time what I'm doing is I'm going in and I'm fixing the color gradation, not the texture. So if I wanted to go in and I wanted to pull out some of the redness here, this is a great way to do it, because if you look at her skin and we really start to zoom in, you can see areas that have, areas that have more redness. So right around here is really red. Can you see like the reds and the pinks that go right around this area of her eyebrows, and how pink and red they look compared to the other parts of the texture over here? So you can go in now, because it's only changing the color, and you can start to pull those colors into each other and soften them. And then same thing, if you're pulling around, and you're doing that without messing with the actual lines and the texture of the skin. It's hard to show you guys on the thing because I think a lot of the detail gets lost if you're not almost overdoing it. But the general rule when you're looking for texture is that you want to take it down just enough to soften it without losing all the details. So you want that sharpness in her face here. So the first layer should be, I'd say probably between like 2 and 5, depending on how bad their skin is. So you don't want to lose all of the pores and the general skin texture that your skin naturally has. You just want to take it down just enough that you start to lose the details. So like for me, that's like 1.2 is plenty in difference. It's just enough that it goes away. And then same thing. Go back up again. Image. Apply image. You're going to go to layer 1. Subtract. And okay. And then you can see the little pieces. I don't know if you guys can see it. There's the little pieces of texture from the hair and stuff. Those are all, that's all the texture being separated from it. And then you come down and you go to linear light, and now it looks the same as the original. So you can go through and select like this, which is fine if you're doing quick editing, and then you're going through and you're just softening it. Most of the time what I'm doing though is I'm actually using one of these because it's a patience thing if you want the images to look good. So I can show you guys quickly if I'm going in and selecting big things. Taking them down, you can see the difference in the which is great for showing, but a lot of people blur the skin to try to fix it, and you don't want to have no detail in here. Like you want to keep all of this that's under there. You just want to even out the skin tones and understand the difference. So for example, right here she's got like a little skin blemish. It's both. So if you're looking at it solely from the standpoint of color, it lightens up here because the light will hit on the highest point of it and then recede away. So you would want to retouch that up in color, but then you would also want to go up because it protrudes away. It's picking up on the outside texture as well. I think actually. So if you're not touching up both, it won't go away. Whereas here is another little makeup spot. Those are just color blemishes. So you want to get rid of them, but you don't want to take away any of the texture of the skin while you're doing it. So being able to go in, if she's like not having a good makeup day or you didn't have a makeup artist on point and you want to go in and touch all these. That's what you're doing. So most of the time when I'm going in and I'm skin editing, I'm going in on the color layer and I'm just looking for spots that stick out and taking out the color. And you just want to work your way around the face. But you want to stay at a high, I'm actually above 100% right now, but you want to stay at a pretty high zoom rate close to the actual thing so that you can see, because a lot of times if I'm editing back out at like 30–40%, I can still see where the spots are for the most part to be able to go in, but I'm not paying attention to things until I get close, and then I'll start to zoom in and I'll start to see places like this where I went too far and so I lost the detail and I have smudges. And I've done that a couple of times, especially when I was learning this technique, where I wouldn't catch it until it was in print and then I had to go back and reprint it. So the trick is to be able to go in and change exactly what you want, whether that's the color or the texture, without touching the other part and without getting this kind of effect where you're losing all of the detail and the structure of the skin. Okay, so let's go back and we'll do it for real. Done. So we'll go to about 2.5. Image. So the first thing you're doing with skin is you're going and you're looking for anything that is an age spot, a blemish, big things that are creating discoloration on the face. My general rule is that I don't get rid of birthmarks or freckles or natural things unless they ask me to. And then I'll go through. So we're going to take some of the light out here just so that it doesn't accentuate any of the age spots. Same thing, there's a little bit of light in here. This is also a great way to go in and take out some of the color, but leave the lines of the skin so that we're still paying attention to her age. So I'll want to go in and get rid of any of the mascara lines and discolorations. And a lot of the lines will start to disappear when you start getting rid of the color. So as they're blending in, they become less noticeable. Because the color is actually what makes them really accentuated. So there's a very strong color change in this line. It's actually, if you're looking at it closely, it's kind of a blue-purple, which we don't think of in skin tones, but it's because it's picking up the shadow, and then it comes in here. So we have all this yellow from the sun hitting her face and mixing with the red of her flesh tone, and then because the sun is not coming here, it's fading into gray and blue and shadow. So going in and evening out those tones adds to the illusion of youth, because the younger you are, the more even your skin tones are. We also tend to start getting darker circles and darker color gradation right here and under the eye as we age, because the flesh under the eye is very thin. So it can pick up the colors of blood vessels a lot easier, which is why if you don't have a good night's sleep, they say, oh, you have dark circles under your eyes. Now, because I'm going in and I'm doing this really fast and we had those dark circles, can you see how I'm starting to pull that dark color out and across her face where it wasn't before? So we had it was right there. I'm taking that color now and extending that outward because of the way that it's sampling. So a lot of times you have to go in with the healing brush and sample from here so that you're getting this color. And texture, and this is where the clone brush can come in too, because again, we're not that big. We're sampling color. Now what you don't want to do is, if I come down here and sample, because I'm picking up the yellows and they shouldn't be here, then it's going to look way out of place. And it doesn't look that off when you're looking at it. Like, you wouldn't think that this color is that far from this color, but it really is when you start to pick up from here. Look at what a different color is on her face down here as opposed to up here, and how stark it looks when you take it in. So even though it fits fine and we would say her face is one color, it's made up of all different kind of colors. Same thing, if we pull from this side and come up here, look at the color difference between the two sides of her face. And you wouldn't think that until you start playing with it. So it's important when you're going to make sure that you're sampling from the right places. So if we're going from here and we're trying to bring that color in, then we probably want to sample from right down here. And then if you're still finding that it's too light and we can still see that, either we're going to commit to it and pull it up. But again, because we're pulling the color up and it's not following the structure of her face, we start to lose that form and the 3D effect of her her bone structure. We've lost all that because we took it away with color. So if we want to just lighten that up, what we're probably going to do is use clone and bring it down to about, say, 30%. And then you want to sample from lower. And we're going to keep our brush on 0 for the hardness so that you don't get any hard lines. And then you can go in and just kind of touch it up, just the color, a little bit, just to brighten it up. So can you see, I can see repeating patterns too because I wasn't paying attention, but can you see how much lighter and more lifelike we look in this eye and how much younger it looks? Even though we have all of the texture, you can still see all the lines of her skin, but because we changed the color, look at the difference between her eyes. And we didn't take any of the lines out, any of the texture of her skin. We didn't soften or blur it. It was just color. Color is one of the most overlooked things in skin retouching. So same thing, if we wanted to go here and we wanted to take some of the gray out here, and I think we could probably even go down a little further. We'll take it down to like maybe 17, 18, and we'll sample from nearby here. And you just want to do it a couple of times until that color starts to go away and we're taking that gray out, you know. Now, same thing. Because the light is coming from this side of her and coming across, the light is not going to hit here because the bridge of your nose and going up to your eyebrow would create a shadow like a roof on a porch. So you have to pay attention to where the shadows should be. So I can't go up and take the color out from here over to here, aside from the fact that I'm mangling her eyes. Because if I go and take that out, we start to lose the shape of the eye. Because there should be a shadow here because of the bridge of the nose. Same thing, we see it here. So I won't change the color here because there should be a shadow from the brow ridge and the line of the nose. But I will go in and touch out any skin spots. And I will definitely soften any of her other lines. And I'm gonna, there we go. Okay. So you can see we still haven't touched any of the texture on her face. We're just going in and touching color and softening the color differentiations. But look at how much that changed the wrinkles. Even though they're still there, technically, when we look at them, we didn't take them out. But that's the difference between what an actual wrinkle looks like on your face and how insignificant it actually is on your skin, and how deep set it looks because the light hits the top of it and creates a shadow underneath the change in the skin. So you can actually leave a lot of the texture and lines of the skin in and still create a really dramatic difference. Now, even still, most of my women that came in, they would not want to see this many lines, so that's when we would go in and touch them up. So I want to leave the ones that are part of the expression and not the ones that are part of the age. So this one coming up here, this is from a lack of elasticity on in between the eyebrow and the eyelash. So this one would go. And you may have to go in between the layers and be touching out the color and the texture. These ones here, I would leave because they're part of her. If you really, really want to change it, then what you want to do is you want to keep a very low opacity and you want to just soften it. So going over with the skin nearby, will lessen it, but you don't want to take it away. Same thing over here. You can minimize them, but you don't want to get rid of them. Now, the further they go out from the source, that's where you can start to take them away. So, like, near the creases of the eyes, near the corners of the eyes is where they're originating from, so you want to leave them there. But I don't need them all the way out here on the cheeks, so I can go in and start brushing away here. Because the wrinkles will continue to grow and stretch out the longer they exist, and they'll affect more of the face. Along the bridge of the nose is always age, unless they're laughing really hard. So if they scrunch up their nose, they'll get those wrinkles, but she's not doing that right now. So if she had youthful new skin, if she was 17, 20, she wouldn't have those lines right there, so they can go. So that's really one of the best ways to learn, is to pay attention to children who have perfect skin, the younger the better, and see with their expressions where lines show up. When they laugh, those are expression lines. And if they don't have them, then they're age lines. So you can go in and get rid of anything that is not an expression line. And then part of the problem that I think Alexandra was having with this was that she was actually going in and trying to get rid of all of the red out of the skin, which you shouldn't do, because the reason that we have rosy cheeks and red skin is from the blood underneath the surface. So your skin should have a red tone to it. You can't take it out without making the skin look green, which looks unnatural and makes you look sick. But when you're taking out all of the blotches and going through and kind of evening skin tone, even though we haven't touched any of the color yet, in terms of changing it, like we're smoothing out and we're editing the color underneath to make it match the tones around it more so that it doesn't stand out. So it's resampling. That's naturally getting rid of it, but we haven't gone in and taken out any of the red saturation in the skin or the red coloring. But she looks significantly less red because we had a lot of that around the brow and coming up around in here. So it's a lot easier to start editing out the color after you've already gone in and retouched. So I always go in and touch up the skin texture and the color blotchiness before I start changing any of the tonalities of the color at all. And then when you're done, you can just merge them. So that's our before and after. And we really didn't touch too many of the lines in our skin or the texture. It was mostly just evening out the color across the skin and the blotchiness.
Jessica, this is Chris.
Hi, Chris.
Hey, I got interrupted and I think I missed the part where you were creating the different layers, where you separated the color from the structure.
Okay. So it's really simple. We'll go back. Hang on. Let me copy this so I can pull it back. No. I forgot I'm on that. Hang on. Okay, so your original layer, you're going to start with one and you're going to make 2 copies.
Okay.
Okay. Layer 1 is your lower layer. We'll call that your color layer. That's for changing the colors on anything that you're doing. The second layer is your texture layer. So that's only going to edit the texture. Then what you're going to do is go to your color layer and you're going to go in and blur it. So we'll say usually no more than 5. You want it just enough to take the detail out of the shot, just enough to soften. So usually I'm hanging somewhere between like 2 and 3 on every photo. It depends on how tack sharp it is to begin with. You might need to do less or more depending on how close. But we'll say probably like 2.6 to 2.8 is usually where I am. So it's just enough that it makes it look like you missed your focus.
Okay.
The top layer is your texture layer. So you'll go up to image, apply image, and then let me pull this over so you guys can see it. You'll go to layer, and you want the lower layer. So you want to make sure that this says color, or whatever you name it, your second layer, your first repeat. And then you're going to go to blending and go down to subtract. When you do that, what that does is it makes essentially a grayscale image, but it keeps all of the texture of the photo. So can you see her eye and her hair?
Yeah, just barely.
Just barely,
yeah.
Right, exactly. It's just enough because it took all of the color out and it only left the texture in, which is why it looks like that. Then you're going to go over here where it says normal, and you're going to make it linear light. Essentially what that does is it gives you back your original photograph. So this is what we started with. The first layer we blurred slightly so you can see, especially around the eyes, the focus shift a little bit and soften. This resharpens it. Your color layer will change all of the color underneath. So if I go, well, let me try it this way. If I go and I select all of this light that's on her cheek, and I blur that, see how it starts to fade?
Yeah.
Okay? But if we actually go in and look at it close up, you can still see all of the texture on her skin. We haven't gotten rid of any of that. So you know how you see like really bad editing where the skin starts to look really muddy? Mm-hmm. This is an excellent way to go in and keep all of that texture, but soften out and even the skin. Now you can, if you're doing it fast, for the sake of imaging, you can go in and select layers like this that should be similar layers. And essentially what it's doing is I'm just hitting Command F, which is running the last filter, which was the blur filter that we used for the previous layer. All it's doing is softening all of the colors, and now they're running into each other. So you can see like the harshness of the shadows, and then we have the light here. It's essentially just taking them all and bleeding them into each other. So when you have like, yeah, I know. Right here on her nose, there's a harsh highlight line. Now it's softening. You know, lines on her face. And you want to just, if you're doing it this way, I don't recommend doing it. When you're done, it looks like you were cheating. And you don't get the same kind of definition. But essentially, if you are doing it this way, what you want to do is go through and just select areas that are similar colors and shapes. So you wouldn't want to cross this line because this line is an important face shape, and you don't want to blend that out as much because you start to lose the face. But I would go through and select here and then come under here where it's a little red and then come over here, and you'll see things like the little age spots, they start to disappear. So they soften, and eventually, because you're blurring it and there's less color differentiation, what you're doing is you're losing all of the starkness of the colors. So the more you do it, blend into each other because the less colors there are to actually sample from, because it's blending them all together. Let's go in and bring it up to like 10. This is a good way to see what this kind of editing does, though, and to see the effect that it has when you're overdoing it by selecting it and playing with it, because you can really start to see where color is as opposed to where texture is going through.
So then you could change the opacity on this layer too after you've done all these adjustments, and that would have a further effect to control how much you wanted it to impact the image.
Exactly. So where it gets tricky though is like we're going around here and you'll see when I've seen people do this, the hard time that they have is that even if you can get away with it, then you have to still go in with your healing and your cloning brushes and touch around, because you get these halos around the things that you don't want to lose the focus of. Because if you go over anything important, then you're blurring all of the color. You know, so you can't do it around those. But if you leave it and you're doing around, then you start to get these really sharp color differences right around the edges. And if you go over it, then they start to get muddy because they're blending into each other. So you still have to kind of go over and do it. And you can see it like especially around their eyes.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, but it's a really good way to take all the texture out. However, if you're taking all of the color out, the more we're doing this, the more flat and two-dimensional she's starting to look, because you should have some lines of sharp color based on the structure of the face. So because our light source is coming from her side here, we've essentially gotten rid of every muscle in her face that protrudes or emerges, which is all the personality of the face. So it's good for some things, like you can take it and do it soft around harsh light, and you can see that light start to go away. But now she has that flat, aside from the fact that it's muddy, if we can look past that to just the face, her face looks very flat and two-dimensional. Now, like you said, you can go in and we can just turn down the opacity of it and bring some of it back so that we're keeping a little. And then if we wanted to do that, oh, hang on. Yeah, because I took the opacity down. So if we wanted to do that and pull it down just a little, Now we have a little bit more of the light starting to protrude on the sides, but we took out a lot of the splotchiness, so it softens it. And you can see around here a lot. But most of the time when I'm doing it with the healing brush, the clone brush, and the spot healing brush, and going in individually and touching up every single line on her face as I'm seeing it. Now, in contrast, if we didn't want to have all of those lines gone and we were actually taking our time, because you can really see it along the eyebrows, the eyes, you know, like it takes too much away when you're doing that. I also have the blur turned up way high so that you can see what I'm talking about, because I want you to see that all the texture stays. So we haven't actually touched the texture of her skin at all, but we softened it and made her look much younger just by changing the color. Most of the time when I'm doing it, I'm going in with the individual tools and I'm touching up the individual marks. So I'm going in and I'm looking for the color differentiations, but I like still having the separation of the frequency layer because I want to go in and be able to touch up this spot without changing the texture or losing the lines necessarily, because now this line doesn't fade out. Like if you follow the lines of the wrinkles, they're harsher where they're heaviest, and then they start to fade in and they kind of fade away. So if you go in and you touch out, and I go, okay, well, I'm going to touch out all of this blotchiness here because I want that yellow gone, then I'm creating harsh endings to the wrinkles, and they start, and then you want to keep going back through and trying to fix them, and then you end up with like repeating lines and patterns in the skin because you're picking up all of that texture. And skin texture is kind of like snowflakes. It changes everywhere that you are on the face. So I can't come down and sample from the cheeks. Even if the color's right, I can't come down and sample from there and put it here because the skin, the way the skin is and the way that the pores look is totally different there. Same thing, you can see it kind of stretch across. Like look at how small the dots and the pores are and how circular they are and how they start to get stretched as you come out because your cheeks are constantly stretching and contorting and contracting back and forth because you use them so much in your facial expressions and even when you talk. Does that make sense?
Yes, thanks.
So we'll merge that and then we'll take it down a little bit just to give the general idea. So for Alex, looking through and trying to take some of the redness out of the skin, being able to go through and just take some of the color out will help with that a lot. You can see it especially like on her cheeks here. So look at the difference between how red and splotchy her cheeks and her nose look across than when we took just the color out, even though we didn't, and we left the lines of her face, which is important to me. One, because I want to honor her at the age that she is. You don't want to make this woman look like she's 20. You want her to look her age, but you want her to look that age and feel beautiful at that age. So I can go in and just kind of see at what point it's too flat, which is right about there, and at what point we're taking enough of it out, and then if I need to, I can go in and touch up some more and go through. All right, let's go ahead and couple minutes. So we want to pull some more of the yellows because we have this nice sun coming through. And then again, like sometimes if I'm not sure where I want it to be, I'll see what Photoshop says. Like, where would you like to see it? Now, it's going in and it's taking out a lot of the yellows that I added and then taking it out, but she's still, even though we turned down the color, I still feel like the red's really coming out. We just lost a lot of the vibrancy of the color. So for me right now, Photoshop is not smarter than me. Let's go into black and white and actually pull some of the reds and pinks out. We want to keep her flesh tones. And I want to turn down a little because I don't want to pull them up. Now, if you go in and select the red filter, all we are doing right now is changing the coloring for the reds. So if we go in and we pull that out, you can see it especially in her hair because she's a strawberry blonde, how much we're pulling that out. So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go in and I'll select the layer that I want to change the color because I don't want to pull it from everywhere. So we'll go in and select around. I'm going to include her hand because that's flesh too. Good color balance. I'm sorry. Go to black and white and go to the red filter. I'm going to pull a little bit of the green away too. And then I'm going to go in and pull the color back. Soft and brush it back in anywhere because I did a really rough cut. On the face. So not a lot of that. Now I'll go in with the color balance and I'll and so then essentially what I'm doing is like a more subtle version of selective coloring. So whatever I want the viewer to focus on is what I'm going to pay attention to and draw out. And then to get away from the selective color, because what you don't want to do is make it cartoon-like. So if I go all the way up to 100 and add all the color of her hair back in, now that I made everything else pale, her hair starts to look like hazard cone orange, and she starts to have almost like a zombie-like kind of feel to her face because I took so much of the red and the color out. You know, same thing. If I go in and take all of the color in her eyes and add that back in, it doesn't look natural as a result. So whatever I'm adding color back into, I want to add color around that area as well and fade it out to something else. So if I'm like in love with these big, you know, blue-green eyes and I want to add them in, then what I'm probably going to do is go into maybe 25, 30% and start adding in elsewhere, like around the eyebrows. You know, and you want to kind of, this is where having a makeup understanding and background is too, because of contouring and how the face works. So I wouldn't want to go in at 100% with the lips, because again, we'll start to look a little cartoony going around, and you'll pick up, if you're not in, you'll start to pick up bits of the skin texture and it won't work. But we can actually go in, because we kept the color everywhere else now, we can go in and add the color back into her face, and it'll brush some life in. And then you want to think about where it is that you do want that color, which would probably be on her cheekbones. So we'll come in and we'll add it even more here, but it's at 0 hardness on the brush so that the really soft line's being added in. And it's just little bits and pieces going around. And then maybe I'll go through and pull out different colors in the hair, around the lips. And so it's really subtle. Like, they're not big changes when you're looking at it. They're just little pieces that we're adding in and taking away, but you can see the difference now between how red her skin looked and how it looks now. And then again, same thing. Now I might go in and go, okay, well, I've been playing with it for a while, so what does Photoshop say? I don't like the auto tone. It makes her skin too icy. How about auto color? See, now because I've warmed it up so much, Photoshop's looking at that and trying to balance the warmth out, because it's going, there's all yellows and reds everywhere, which is interesting because in order to take the reds and the yellows away, one of the interesting ways to do that is to actually add red and yellow everywhere else. So if we go back to the original photograph, we'll go back to the retouched one, and we go, oh, her face is really red. How do I add that out? Well, if you look at a color wheel and go back to like middle school art, whatever's across from that, the contrasting color will pull that out more when you're looking at it. This is why I'm always telling my apprentices, when you guys are doing your websites, black or white for your website. Don't do green or pink or yellow or anything, even if it's part of your branding, because it changes the way people see your photographs and what everything looks like. So if I wanted to go in and take all of this red out of her face without actually touching her face, I would go in and select around and then invert the selection, make a copy of that, and then go in and change the hue and saturation of everything that's around her, and watch how quickly her face starts to look less red, because we're changing, and we're not touching her skin, but because we're changing everything else around her. Now, obviously, we totally changed her hair color too. So again, I'm overdoing it so that you get the point. But even if we go in and pull that back, and then soften it around the edges so that it blends in a little more. Her skin looks less red because we changed the color theory of everything else. So then when we go in and we start playing with the colors as a whole, because there's so much red and yellow around her face now, her face starts to look less red as a result of it, because it's a complementing color. So if I take, let's do this a different way. If I take white and paint the whole block, and then let me pull this off. And then I put big, so the hardness so you can see, I put a big thing in the middle. Would we agree that that is a very dark color?
Yep.
Now, does it still look like a really dark color? So do you start to understand how like color theory starts to come in with it? Like if I had done this one first with the black on it, then we'd go, no, it's kind of a light grayish olive kind of color, you know, but if I take it and I mix it with white, you can start to see how different colors that you're adding in are affecting different things and how you're seeing them. So it's the same way, and it gets really interesting when you start actually playing with colors. So we could say and agree that this is orange, right? But if I go and pick another color, and you're looking at the color picker with it, will it still look orange? So if we go up to red and we go to way red, we can say, yeah, still orange next to that. Red and orange. And it's a light orange. It's like a tangerine orange. But if we then go to green, maybe blue, and do the same thing, look at how the color orange changes and how much darker of an orange that looks now. And we're not changing the orange color at all. So now we would probably agree that it's more of like a pumpkin, kind of burnt umber kind of orange. Now we're back to like a lighter, happy orange, peel orange, sherbet kind of orange. Now it looks even lighter. And so when you get into subtle colors like, let's see if we can find a good flesh tone. So we'll say that's a good cartoon color skin tone. Well, when you start putting other colors up against it, it starts really changing how you're perceiving that tone and whether they're looking pale or if they're looking tan or washed out. And so all of these colors are usually overlapping with hair and other things. So you start to really see it when we're going back and forth through it. I got it. I got it. Stop it. Here we go. You know, so look at how light that looks. When you start to put it in, and then as you're adding more color, and different colors. This is Brian and I were having this conversation during his critique with the green wall behind him and how I didn't like it. You can start to see where it meshes, how it starts to wash out and make it look pale. So color theory has a lot to do with everything around you, which is why if you really pay attention to the images that you're moved by, there's a lot of forethought into the color, and not just the color of hair and makeup and wardrobe, but the color of the wall behind them, and the color of their eyeshadow and how that actually matches the shirt that they're wearing. And so you see these color coordinations going on in between. Like right now, Bonnie actually has a little bit of a green cast on the sides of her face from her green room, you know, and it's a beautiful room and it works great. And we don't notice these subtleties when we're looking at people, because we would agree that she has flesh toned skin and we go, yeah, she's flesh toned. But if you look at Bonnie and the colors that she's getting, because she's got that green coming in and around, it's giving her much more orange kind of color in her skin. So she actually looks tanner. Where if we go over to Anita, who has a blue shirt on and then the black chair and more colors, she's got more pink and red to her skin tone. You know, and then same thing, like because it's white, it looks totally different, and we start to see different things, and then that's where light starts to play, because as I let more light into my studio and the color on the wall changes based on the light, the color of my skin changes as well. And the harsher, this is where we start to get into texture. So because it's harsh side light coming in right now, you can start to see all of the lines that don't go away anymore and any imperfections on the skin, whereas softer light, soft box, is a little more forgiving. But with that, it's not just the light change, it's the color of the curtains. This was not by accident. So because these are warm in a gold color, they reflect back, which is a really flattering kind of thing, as opposed to if it was just white, where it would wash out the skin a little more. And if the skin's washed out, then it shows a lot more of the texture and the color blemishes. So if I come up nice and close and you're looking at the skin and it looks even with it, the more harsh the light that's going across, you can start to see all of the little texture and bumps and imperfections in the skin all the way across, and all these lines that don't go away back and forth. And if I had red curtains and put them up, it would reflect red into the skin, which by contrast would actually take a lot of the red out. So we're usually red around our noses and right around the nostrils, and we start to get red around the brows, and then you know, the cheeks when you get flushed. So if you had red reflecting back, let's see if we can actually do this. If we took red and reflected it back against it, you can start to see how it evens out and the red carries in. So because the red is carrying across the texture of the skin, you're actually losing the red splotchiness of it. In contrast, because of different color variations, if you go into a good makeup artist or a good makeup store, they have facial primers before you put your makeup on, and they tone them based on your skin colors. So if you naturally have really red skin, they'll put green in the mixture of the primer to flat wash your face and counteract the red because it takes it away. So there's all these little nuances, and I think that it really, really helped when I was learning how to do portraiture getting started, because I started with painting, and they taught us all of these different color variations and how they feed into each other. So going back to it now, you know, we're here from there, and as you're going back and forth, Let's see if I can get back since I was. You can see the difference in color and how it's working. And you can see watching her skin going back through, like, doesn't it look when you're watching it like the colors are changing? Like, watch the orange, because we know that that was totally, we didn't touch it, we didn't change that color at all. But watch how the colors start to shift based on the other colors around them, particularly with the orange coming up because they're hard lines. Does it look like we're changing the shade of orange? Did you see it shift color there? And we know it didn't. I didn't change it at all. Same thing. Does it look like we shift color with it while we're doing it? So even though we didn't touch her face at all and all we did was change the things around her, watch her flesh tones. Does it start to look like her skin is changing colors too? Okay. Does that make sense? Is that helpful, or is that just a lot of useless info that you wasted an hour of your life on?
I think it's good. I'm just curious if you ever do that with landscape, or maybe not to that level of detail, but some.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. If you look at images like, I do that a lot when I'm combining portraiture with it. So you'll notice I pay a lot of attention to my color with everything around it. And so you start to see similar tones pick up. So the same tones that are down here in the purple are the ones that are picking up in the purple butterflies here. And when we start to get into these reddish kind of colors up here, they're more muted variations that are picking up in here. And the same tones that are behind are this. You know, this is shot in my backyard. That was green, like, you know, grass green. So I'm always picking up different colors. The color of her lips are the same color as these butterflies. And so there's a commonality between everything that's going on. And you'll start to see that. And so when people are saying that they love the color of my work and they can't figure out why, that's why. So if we go to my website, you can see that that's also a really, really common thing. And again, I picked a really neutral kind of tone so that it wouldn't distract from the other colors. So when we go into the Reliquarian series, you can see not only do I shoot with it in mind in certain images, but I shoot when I'm shooting collections, I'm paying attention. So can you see how the colors start to wash into each other and fade back out, and how there's commonalities in the colors between images, because I know I'm shooting this for a book. So these are all in order, and when we start to get breakdowns where you're seeing drastic color shifts, like this is a pretty good one. There's a little bit of the purple, but you can see up here, like these two fit right next to each other. They're the first and second image. Here's the third and the fourth. So this breakdown here, where we start to move away from all the warm colors and into the purples, provides a segue here. So your eyes just kind of wash through. This is the next one. So even though we got really bright with the colors and it's very springy and colorful with the butterfly book, the purple bleeds in from the other image in almost like a vignette around it. Now I shot this one, but there's actually 4 or 5 images in between these two. So it'll do the same thing. And then here as well, you know, there's commonalities with what I'm doing, but I'm always paying attention. If you look at any of my shots where I have a lot of the background, my grass is almost never green because green washes out the flesh tones, and I don't like it. Even on this image where it's a child that's being poisoned, And so she's supposed to be washed out and more zombie-like. Like, I still didn't want the grass competing for it with the color. So I do that a lot in my work, and um, I do it when I'm shooting my client work as well, which is part of it. Like, everybody loves um, the walls in the studio, and we spent 3 days painting them so that all of the light would reflect warm color tones back, and everybody looks like they have a sun-kissed tan when they're in the studio. You know, it's not by accident.
What color is it?
For the walls, they're like a warm kind of golden yellow. Let me see. This is pretty close to the actual color. It's like a warm, muted kind of tone that has just enough gold to kind of pull the colors back. But she's not that tan. The light bouncing off of the walls and back to her brings all that warm color in the same way the light coming in from your window throws some of the green up under your chin because of the way that light reflects. So I do that, and then I have the one room in the back that has the red. See, even when it's green, it's not green. So it's the kind of thing where you would say, is the grass green in this picture? And we'd say yes, you know, because of the contrast and because your eye naturally goes, grass is green, leaves are green. It's a muted green, but it's a green. But if you look at it, it's really not. It's a lot of tan and a little bit of yellow. There's a lot of pinks and reds in it if you're really looking closely at the colors. Same thing, sky has a lot of purples more so than blue, even when it's a muted saturated tone. I'm always playing with the color tonalities of it. You know, warm colors are always very flattering to skin tones. You know, shooting a redhead, I went really, really warm with the fire and the flames that were a lot more yellow to accentuate that. But I don't think I've ever shot an image where the grass is like green. I'm always looking for what the colors and everything are around to be able to accentuate them. Having the lighter colors on the wall and the fact that they're warmer colors also helps to bounce light back and forth without making harsh light, so I can shoot with a lot lower lighting than a lot of other people do. So there's a lot of candles, and a lot of times, even though I have the strobes, there's plenty of times that I just put the modeling light on the strobes and shoot the modeling light and have lamps and candles and stuff on so that it looks like the candles are the light source. The other reason that I like that muted tone on the walls is because it's very, very easy for me to change the colors of this to whatever I want. But you'll notice, like, there are no, part of my style is the sort of desaturated kind of feel. A lot of it comes in post. I guess that's it. But there's no really harsh colors. Like, this red is probably about as saturated as I got, and I desaturated this a lot, but I desaturated everything else around it more, so it looked to be a higher saturation by comparison, even though it was turned down. And, you know, Brian, we were talking about finding your style and consistency. This is what I'm talking about in the sense of, even though they're very different images and I'm shooting indoors and outdoors and they're different styles and different things going on, you can still see that sort of, for me, a lot of my style and what's recognizable about my collection as a whole is the color gradation. And even when I'm shooting in different colors, like this one is purple, that one has more of the green, this one is the warmer color tones, you know, what's going on with them, there's still a sense of flow and recognizability about them that I feel like I could take my images and put everybody else's in the group and it would be easy for you to pull them out as mine based on the visual elements of them that go throughout. So that's what I'm looking to see from you guys once we Once we start doing critiques and we start getting better at the work and we're accomplishing the kind of results we want and we're getting what we want out of the image, the next step is always looking through and starting to be able to recognize the work as a whole. The way you pose, the way you light, the way you shoot, the way you retouch. But I'm always echoing that. So when we did the pink negligee, this is a white wall behind her that I was adding color tonality with the pink and the yellow. The yellow mimics her flesh tones. The pink mimics the negligee. Same thing. The wood tones, they get mimicked in her flesh tones. Same kind of color gradation. Eyeshadow, bathing suit, shoes. Same color tonalities. The light color of the flowers matches the highlights in her skin. Reds, orange, yellows, all the way throughout. The wall color, the candles, the outfit, the skin tones, the lampshade. Same thing. Even though it's the yellow wall, darker skin, so I'm pulling out the darker textures in the wall here to match up with that, and I'm accentuating the highlights on her skin with the white shirt. All the same colors all the way through. So it's not necessarily all desaturation and monochromatic in post. I'm paying attention to that while I'm setting up the shot as well. Yellow, bright sunny day, yellow hair, yellow paint on the walls. Are you starting to see it? Like, I don't want to beat it, but you can start to see. And then you have the elements like the girl that had the red fabric. There was that punch of red that didn't match anything else in the thing, so it became a statement piece. Same thing. This is a beautiful model that came in and got shot, but she's a little more curvy. So having a stronger color with the blue, even though it's still desaturated and it doesn't overpower, because this color isn't echoed anywhere else, you pay more attention to it. So it takes a little bit of the focus off of her curves and makes you pay attention to that, and then the posing adds to that. So that's a good way to accentuate her and all of the curves that we do want to accentuate. We were talking about this too, Brian, that when you bend, you create an accordion effect. So because she's bending to the one side that she's pulling the hand down, she definitely has a crease in her flesh from that side, because no matter how tall or skinny you are, like Anita is really slender too, but if you bend to one side right now as far as you can feel at what point your flesh folds and starts to create creases. And the more you bend, the more those lines and folds in the flesh appear. Now, on the opposite side, the interesting thing about that, and we can see that when we're going through. So if I bend on this side, you can start to see, even in the fabric, just because of the way that you're contorting it. The more I bend, the more these lines are going to show up, and you can see this. So this is not flattering. This will never sell for anybody. It's not good. But in contrast, because I'm doing that on this side and we're getting all these rolls, look at how nice and smooth that line is all the way down. So if I can do that with them and I'm creating those kind of lines, then by contrast, as long as the line of flesh that I'm showing is the smooth line, then it sells as she's skinny because there's no folds in the flesh. Reds, yellows. So do you start to see how, like, with this one, because she's outside, we're doing more warm and yellow and golden colors to mimic what's going on around her and the higher flesh. And then when we're shooting indoors, we're shooting lower light, and see how we start to pick up the reds in like the collarbone and the décolletage area, and in her lips, and in the bodice of the negligee. All of those colors complement and feed into each other. Same thing. So the opposite of that is having that pop of color that doesn't show up anywhere else. That'll draw attention. And that's when it's a statement piece. But even then, there's just the little hint of it on her cheeks and her lips, just to tie it in. Same thing. The jeans are a pop of color that isn't anywhere around, but she's got blue eyes and she's got the blue and gray eyeshadow that adds it in. So they're like these little subtle touches so that nothing is solitary and an island of color in the image. So that's always what I'm looking for with it. And then all of the other color tones are always pulling in. So this sepia kind of feel is what I'm known for. Those are, I love that color. I'm really drawn to it. I don't know why. I like the antiquity kind of feel of it. So I tend to pull a lot of the color out of my flesh tones as a result and shoot them really pale like that. But even I keep that sort of monochromatic desaturation look even if I'm moving away from the warm colors and into blues. Same thing with, wait, not that one. With this one, the color that's in the fabric, and incidentally, this fabric that's around her is that same red that we saw in the other one, like that really fuchsia red in the field. Same piece of fabric, I just desaturated it. So you can get a lot of use out of one thing and make it look really different, because here it looks like almost more purple than it does red because of the way that we played with the color tones in it and we desaturated everything else. But I went in and played and pulled a lot of the purples from this into the leaves and everything around just to give it the more fantasy, mythical kind of feel and tie the colors together. Same thing here. Like I'm always looking to echo flesh tones. The white of the fabric, the white of the ocean. They're always complementing and moving each other. This one moves more towards the pinks because of the tutu. I love that shot. But yeah, like this is Cadence. Cadence has piercing green blue eyes. If you're on my Facebook page, you can see the ones Lindsay Adler just took over. Like, but I love that they're really desaturated here, and I don't feel, even though her eyes have a really piercing color, and I've always loved them, I don't feel like we lose any of the power of her eyes, even though I desaturated the color of it quite a bit, because everything else got desaturated more than her eyes, so her eyes still pop, even though it's a very, very dull color compared to what it actually is. You know, so there's little things that you can do, but I think that color play really has a lot to do with images, and I think if you don't have an art and a painting background, that you're not taught that by other photographers because they don't think like that. I think that's totally a painting background and not a photography background for me. Yeah, like even here we have like the warmth in her hair and then it echoes in the skin, but the eyes pull out the colors that are behind it, and that's what ties it in. And a lot of times I'm matching that. Like I don't remember, but I'm 80% sure that her eyes are like blue, like baby blue, so they weren't matching the green, but playing around with the color tonalities until we start to get this darker color that matches in with this darker color and the lighter colors picking up here. a lot of times I'm making that happen. So something to keep in mind. You don't have to do it to the extent that I do. That's just what speaks to me in the images, but it is something that you should be looking at. So if you have a girl with red hair and you're putting her in a white dress, don't put her necessarily on a blue wall. You know, just paying attention to how the colors are reacting and affecting, and you can kind of figure it out with, you know, very small demonstrations that make a big difference. So if we're talking about the light coming in, and I'm losing it because it's kind of the end of the day, but if we're talking about the light coming in and I'm playing with blue, when you're paying attention and you're looking for it, you can kind of start to see how it reflects. Like, you remember when you were little, I don't know if you guys would do this, but you would put like buttercups, the flowers under, and you would see like the gold light reflected on your chin. We used to do it all the time. Like, you can start to see the colors coming in and reflecting back to the face like reflectors do, as opposed to if you're working with something pink and now my cheeks are all rosy, you know. So it's just little things like that that you're playing with. Like, that's pretty good. You can see it like on the highlight, as opposed to if we're going with something blue and how the shadow shows up. So it's little things like that that people don't pay attention to, and paying attention to them is the difference between good and exceptional images. So that was really long-winded. This is why I don't do retouching videos with you guys, because they're really long-winded.
I don't know if you have time, but I just put a link in the chat to a photo of some horses that I was unhappy with the green. I already posted it to the Focus Lounge, but I had trouble with the green grass in the background and just not feeling like it worked well.
Okay.
So maybe this is a good example of a way that you would adjust.
Okay. Let's pull it up. Hang on one second.
Now that'll be a JPEG, but I think
that's okay.
Yeah.
I shoot in JPEG, so I do. I get yelled at all the time about it. What did I do? Okay. Let's see. So we weren't happy with the green. So one of the first things that you would probably want to do is figure out what the other colors are. The first one that jumps out at me. So here's what normal people do. They look at it and they go, grass is green, horse is black. And that's pretty much where they leave it. Where we're seeing the commonalities is right in here with the browns and the oranges. I'm seeing that right there. So you have to do one of two things. Either you have to bring more of this color into the horses, or more of the horse color into the background. So again, and we'll just do a really rough edit, but if we go through, you never work on the original layer. If we go through, and we just kind of rough cut around, and now we have that to work on, I would probably just go in, and I play with black and white just because it takes all of the color off. Oh, I lost it. So look at how much more the horses look like brown horses than black horses now, because we took all that green away. And the black and white, when you're playing with the tint, it really gives you a chance to kind of play and see what colors would complement and how it changes everything else. More important in flesh tones, because you don't want them, like, you know how you say, like, my grandmother used to say all the time, oh, she's looking green around the gills whenever they were sick. So going around and just kind of seeing, I think the orange and the brown actually probably accentuates them pretty nicely. So we'll go in and we'll pull some of the green and some of the yellow. And then it's then it's a matter of which you want to accentuate too. So it looks totally different. Like obviously there's a lot of yellow in this. So if we start pulling that way back, do we want the horses to actually be lighter when we're pulling it out? Or do we want the horses to be darker and to have the background lighter? So we'd have to play with it more, but you can figure out it's a totally different image. I don't want to blow it out, but it's a totally different image looking at this than looking at something along the lines of that. Changes the whole feel of it.
Yeah.
So that's something to pay attention to as well when you're going through and editing and what do you want it to look like. You know, whereas if we bring it just a little bit, now they're almost blending into each other and you start to lose them. So personal preference, do you like the idea of the horses being lighter or darker?
I like them darker, but I think get more of the oranges in the grass and less of the yellows. Well, because orange and yellow are similar, but maybe it's less of the greens.
So we'll go in. And then we can go in and we can play with it in the hue and saturation. And you can play here too and kind of see where you like it. Okay, so now we're playing with more yellow brown than green, but there's subtle differences. Come on. What am I doing right now? Okay. Let's play with color balance. And then you would just go in and take the color out because we're pulling a lot of the red into the horses then.
Right.
Now, in contrast, you could go the opposite way and actually add more of the greens in.
Mm-hmm.
But turn the saturation down.
Yeah, so that way it looks like grass, but you're muting the impact of the background.
Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of times I'll deal with this too when you're going through, because I went in and took a lot of it out of the horses. You get this sort of like glow halo right here.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be careful with how you're doing it. But if we wanted to keep the green, then you could play around with what green. You know, and if you wanted to tone it up. I like it better a little closer to the yellow. And then you have two options. So I always cut in hard when I'm doing them. Like I want to overlap the horse quite a bit so that I can go back and take it out. And again, going back to color cast and talking about like holding the post-it notes and seeing the color reflecting, you actually want a little bit of that color to come in and over the noses, otherwise it looks fake. So if we totally butcher your photo for a moment, forgive me. But if we go in and we are living near a power plant, with red, and then we try to make the grass around it. Well, that won't work now because I already cut it. But this will show you the halo pretty well. But if I try to go around this now, go back around the original one. And now I try to make this color. If I don't pull some of this color in, it looks fake. Right now, because I cut it and it's a hard line and we're seeing the red because we have these mutant red horses, if I wanted to go in and make that believable without changing it anymore, and you had red horses on this green background, it won't work right now if I go in and cut it out to the edge. So for this horse, we'll go in and cut here. And if you use a really harsh line so that you can cut it evenly, one, it's especially hard with horses or anything with fur because you're either going to go over or you're not going to have enough. So you can see it there. But if I wanted to make it believable, then I would keep the hardness down and I would go down to a lower opacity, probably about half. And I would work on the inside and just soften the layers so that it bleeds into the color so that you're getting that sort of reflection through.
It's kind of like feathering a vignette.
Yeah, and then you don't want to ever keep it at 100%. Again, this is still, because it's subtle, and this is part of why I like to work in muted tones. You know, if we were instead looking at, you know, blue, grass, you would want to keep that little bit of blue around the edges because it would reflect off of them. And you would want to pay attention to where it would be most likely to reflect. So you would be able to take it away from, say, the top of his mane here because the light isn't coming, the reflection isn't coming from above, it's coming from below. So the same way we were talking about those buttercups, you wouldn't necessarily keep it here. You'd be able to take more of it off, but more of it would show up underneath because the light is hitting the ground and reflecting up. So it would reflect back this way, which is why it would be, this horse is more believable that he's in somewhere with seafoam green grass as opposed to this one where you have this harsh orange color, because this blue should be transferring into this.
Mm-hmm.
If I wanted to make it believable, the other way to do that is to take the tonality down, and you can still keep the majority of your green grass, but you can soften it around the edges of what's going on and pull the actual other colors in. And the more you do that, the more they start to look like they belong. So you're still getting that green kind of feel to it, and it's not red, but you're pulling it in just little pieces at a time, and then just going in, and the further out you go, the lighter the opacity that you're working with to paint it out. So then by the time you're on the outside edges, and the horses take up the majority, but let's say for the sake of conversation, that we were gonna take them and move them, well, and the horses. We were going to take them and move them come on. We're going to take them and move them over here and then extend this part out, and this was all of your grass. You would want it to get progressively greener as it goes. So if we were doing if we were doing this like hazard cone orange color that we have, and we had this going out, and that was the, and you wanted this green, then you would carry that orange color out through just erasing, and it would get progressively greener, but it would start to fade into each other, and that's where you get the believability from. So you still are seeing the green, and then as you go, you can decide where you want to add it to. So if you were doing a shot where the horses were only taking up a third of the image, and you wanted this like green color, but you had these orange horses, then you would go green most of the way, and then you would just go in and you would be erasing in as you go, and then taking the opacity down as you go further out to add to that green so that it would have the fill. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get it. Thanks.
I like it better this way.
It's more mysterious.
Yeah.
Thanks.
But yeah, I mean, it's really, it's the color theory between two things going back and forth. So changing the color of one automatically changes the color of everything else. And a lot of times when people are compositing or playing, this is something that's really big when people are doing composites and like conceptual work, and they'll shoot someone on a backdrop and then try to put them at night in the forest. And they don't realize that the reflections of all of the lights and how it bounces off the wall and the window and their skin. Like, you can't have this kind of light on someone in the middle of the night in the dark forest because they're not having harsh direct light. So you have to shoot it really, really flat, even if you want a dramatic light look. You have to shoot it flat, shoot the background flat, and then go in and add your light digitally in order for everything to kind of fit together. So when we're talking about images like the Reliquarian series, the first couple of images from that are actually, I went to a retreat with Trey Ratcliffe last year, and there had been a really bad forest fire the year that I was born, and the forest was still recovering, and I just didn't think of it in terms like that you would still see all these burned and charred trees 30, 40 years later. But the forest was also growing up around it. So a lot of the background images for that came from that, but I shot her in the golf course next door to my house, you know, and that's very, very green as opposed to this sort of forest that's somewhere in between life and death, and all of the trees were like gray, like epitaphs, so I had all of these different color things. So those were all things that I had to keep in mind while I was playing with. A lot of the times when I'm doing images like these, I'm spending hours playing with them while I'm working on them. When I'm working with client stuff, I'm only spending a couple of minutes in between because I arrange everything. So that's the argument of getting it right in camera. It absolutely comes into play with my retouching because I have the walls painted, because I'm paying attention to all of the colors that are in the room. My editing style and the color tonality that everybody loves me for is 75% in camera because those are the actual colors that I'm working with, and then it's easier to touch and go as opposed to trying to create orange horses and neon turquoise blue grass when you're working with a black horse and green grass. So if you can get it close to where you want it, then it kind of accentuates itself naturally. You know, people say that all the time. My mom used to tell everyone my eyes changed color. They don't, but they look a totally different color when I'm wearing a light blue. They have more of the blue-green in them as opposed to when I'm wearing black or white and the color punches more because of what I'm around. So there are these little subtle changes. That's why eyeshadow's so big. You know, the color of your eyes will look totally different if you're rocking like Mimi Drescher, like blue peacock eyeshadow, as opposed to like earthy and skin kind of tones, and then they accentuate that way. So just be paying attention to color and how color is interacting with everything in your camera is something small that not a lot of photographers do that will make a very big impact in your work. And I think that it will make impact in your work regardless of what genre you're in. So it's one of those things where you start thinking a little less like a technical photographer and a little more like an artist. So, so this was 2.5 hours. Good luck with that, Alexandra. She's never going to send me another image again. You guys are troopers. I can't believe you hung out the whole time. What else can I do for you? Did you guys have any other questions that didn't have anything to do with anything we talked about?
Well, I had one question on the first woman that you did. Now, her hand was up by her face.
Mm-hmm.
So would you also like take wrinkles, tone them down in her hand or her veins or whatever that would make her look older?
Yeah, you have to be consistent all the way around. So anything that's skin that's in the photo has to be retouched evenly. And I can't tell you how many people go and take a woman in, say, her 30s, my age, early 30s, where you're starting to have like the lines on the forehead and just the beginning of lines when you move and you smile. Like I don't want to like smile at anybody anymore because they don't go away for an hour afterwards. But like you have like those beginning lines and people will come in and they will retouch perfectly smooth because I'm in that in-between stage. Like you can't take a woman in, say, her mid to late 40s and above and retouch all the lines off her face or it won't look like her. I could do it. I could take a picture of you and give you 20-year-old skin, but nobody would believe that I didn't retouch the photo. And there are people in the in-between that will go and they will retouch everything on the face so that it's completely smooth and do quality retouching, but they don't pay attention to the lines on the neck that show up. And that's always a telltale for me. So yeah, absolutely. Down the her, it didn't matter as much because she had the jacket on. But like if somebody's wearing something low cut, then you better be, whatever you're doing and whatever you're following, the texture and the tonality of the skin has to follow anything that's in the screen for the shot. So, and I'm much more liberal. So hands carry a lot of age very quickly because we use them and bend them more than any other joints in our body. We are constantly typing and moving and talking and turning and eating and just moving them all day long. So even my daughter, who's 9 years old, has all the lines across her knuckles because we are constantly flexing and straightening them. So I'm pretty generous with hand retouching and all of those lines that were on there, again, understanding the difference. So here's pretty smooth, but you can still see the lines. These are all age lines. They would all go. However, as soon as I start to curve around, these are actual lines that are being caused by the position my hand's in. So if I smooth out this crease here and make it straight, your hand will start to look fake because naturally, again, as soon as you contort, you get that accordion thing. So because we're contorting in, I'm getting all of the creases in the lines here, but this line's still smooth because it's stretching. So while one side's contorting, the other side's always stretching. So you just have to pay attention to which lines are movement lines and expression lines and which ones are age lines. Age lines are anything that don't go away. Like now I'm to the point that like I'm always like, Katie yells at me, she's like, why are you mad at your computer again? Because I always frown when I'm reading. And it's not because I can't see, it's just a concentration face, but I always look like I'm angry at everything. So these lines don't go away anymore. Like I sit in the mirror and go like this and try to straighten them out. Like they're there to stay, they're age lines, you know. Whereas when I am actually frowning, like this one right here is because I'm frowning, it's the expression line. So you have to pay attention to the face. So I could totally retouch all the lines on my forehead if I'm sitting and I'm smiling because they don't go. But if I wanted a picture where I was making faces at you, these would have to stay because if they're gone, the expression's gone. You know? Same thing with the smile. These ones under the cheek stay. Whether you're 5 or you're 85, these always show up because you're pulling your cheekbones up. This is another thing when you're seeing people retouch faces, like so-and-so was crying in the photo or we want to retouch it, and they try to turn the corners of the mouth up to make the kid smile. I see it. Part of the problem with being able to know and why so many people have a hard time drawing smile lines is because they go right here and they mess with the corners of the mouth and they go, and it looks ridiculous because they're pulling up, but they're not paying attention to the fact that like when you actually smile, don't pay attention to my face at all. You know I'm smiling, and we would agree your smile comes from your mouth, right? Do you have a smile? Yes, you smile with your teeth and your lips. Either you're, you know, and you're doing that, but you can tell I'm smiling without seeing my mouth because of my eyes. Because as soon as I smile, the eyebrows go up, the eyes, and I'm one of those people that when I smile, my eyes disappear because I'm like, yay! Like it almost looks like Asian, like all of it's gone. You know, so you have to pay attention to that. So when people are retouching, a lot of times they like, you know, liquefy, you know, you have that pointer. That's exactly what they do. They take the corners of the mouth and they go, and it doesn't look natural because they're not paying attention to the rest. So after you're done going here to get the corner of the lip, then you also have to push up on the cheek to get the thing, and you got to come up here, and then you got to come up here too. So you know, a lot of it with retouching and changing, especially expression, is paying attention to how the bone structure and the muscle structure of the whole face changes. So if I have a kid that's being particularly grumpy and doesn't want to smile for photos and I want to add it in, one, again, it's subtle. Most people will take it. And instead of just going, because you can take someone that's like, you know, like I have these kids every year, and instead of just going up a little, they're like, you know, and that's what they look like in the photos too. Like that's exactly how they look, and I'm like, their mom knows they didn't smile in that picture, you know. So, but if I'm doing that, I'm paying attention to cheekbones and to eyebrows, and you smile with your whole face when you do it, and you're sad with your whole face, and you're angry with your whole face. So when people are trying to change different things with the structure, and that's a big problem for when people are trying to slim faces and get rid of double chins and stuff, is that they're also messing with the expression structure. So when you smile, your cheekbones go up. Well, if I'm carrying extra weight and I'm a little pudgy in the face and we're trying to get rid of that, then by taking that down and smoothing that out and pulling the chin in, I'm also getting rid of a lot of the expression lines. So it's a really fine art, and you kind of just have to play with it. But that's one of the other things that I see people do a lot, which has nothing to do with the simple answer, which was yes, I would retouch the hand.
Does it get harder when like somebody's my age in their 60s, or like my mother who's in her 90s? Is there a certain point which you just like, I just
You're hopeless.
have the wrinkles?
No, it's I think it's just again understanding which ones are expression and which ones are age lines.
That's when you do really soft focus.
Yes and no. I think that age lines can be really. I think that people that are older have their own kind of grace. and their own kind of appeal. I'm looking for an image in particular. Let me see if I can find it. Because we do the Giving Tree sessions every year, which are there we go. Okay, so we do the Giving Tree sessions, and they get to come in for free, and we waive the $500 sitting fee in exchange for them bringing in unwrapped toys. Let me see if I can find the original here. I don't know that I have the original, but I'll show you anyway. So this woman came in, and she came in with her whole family, and we did a great shot of everyone, and she was easily in probably her 70s. She was definitely a grandmom, and she told me, take out everything. She's like, I want to be 25 again. I want to look like one of your French girls. It was like, you know, and it was really cute. So she had a ton of texture to her skin because, you know, she's in her, at least her late 60s. We had lots of forehead lines, lots of lines around the eyes. So there's a difference between, and we'll see. I left a lot of what was important in around the expression. So even though these are really deep-seated lines, I left them, you know, and I left a lot of the texture in around her face because she should have that. You can't give her porcelain skin without her not looking like herself anymore. But I did take out a lot of the extra lines that were here from her face, from her skin being, and necks are one of them that really start to show up. I'd say after 50 at the latest is when neck muscles and skin on the neck starts to lose a lot of its elasticity, and we start to get a lot more wrinkles. So there was a lot of retouching done in here that had a lot of heavy, deep-seated lines, and we still kept the general shape and enough of it to be honest, but still flattering. Well, that's not what I wanted to do. Same thing, like she was like really adamant about taking out all of her lines, so we took out a lot of the forehead lines, but you can see that I left a lot of the ones around her mouth. And so it's just a game. Like the general areas that keep them and that develop them first are the eyes and around the nostrils and around the lips, because that is what we're always moving in our faces. Because we use it when we talk, and we use it, you know, when we're singing, and we use it when we're making faces at someone, and, you know, just natural throughout the day, even while we're talking. Like, we're very expressive with our faces to get to get across all of our communication. So our eyebrows are always going up and down, and we're always smiling and then getting angry. And so this side of the face is like always changing. So around your main facial structure is where we'll start to see lines first. Now we see a lot of them in the forehead because of the eyebrows. So these muscles actually move a lot because we're going up and down with our faces. This is going to be really fun to watch on silent later. But these are age lines because kids they do all the same stuff with their faces, and they don't have any of these. Hey, Katie. Come here, please. But they'll start to stay the more that you do it. Come here, Katie. We're going to do a little demonstration. Your cute little face over. This is Katie. She's 8 years old. We can all hate her because she has perfect, beautiful little skin. I want you to make a really angry face. Can you do that? Don't smile. I said angry. Okay, so see how these lines are still showing up on her cute little face because I'm embarrassing her? We're going to start to get red right around here now. You know, but she doesn't have it. Can you make a mad fish? Can you try? You're terrible at this game. So see how even when she's not paying like attention and she can't do it, that she's moving like different facial muscles, and we can kind of see it. And even with the light, we can even see like where the lines are going to start to show up later in her life. Smile real big. Give me all of your teeth. Show them all. You know, so see how much of that's in her eyes? Like she'll have mine and she'll start to get crow's feet first. Now, can you look like really surprised? Right? So she gets the forehead lines from that, but as soon as she stops and looks like a normal child again, all of them go away. All right, that's it. Go away. So the general rule for learning what lines to retouch are to pay attention to children, because when they're making expressions, they'll get the same lines, less of them because their skin bounces and so it's got more flexibility. But you'll see them right here at the corners of the eyes, right here under the cheeks and down. Anything, and the bigger you smile, the bigger they get too. So if she's giving a little smile, we'll get these ones, and the further out you go, you start to get more of them. Anything after these two are age lines from your muscles and the skin not being able to hold taunt. So, you know, the older we get, the less elasticity, the more it'll hang, and the longer it takes to bounce back. So I think that you can still, and this is where at the beginning when we were retouching the color but not the texture, you can really leave a lot of the texture in the skin to honor the age, but not necessarily the light and dark, which makes it really deep-seated.
Can you, when you do the initial photo shoot, can you control conditions to not get that as much?
Oh yeah, flat lighting, softboxes. Softboxes are basically windows. That's what they were created to mimic. You know, it's a big square. It's made to be a window. So you know, it's totally different, and we were showing that before. Earlier when the light was coming in, you could see all of the texture on my forehead and my skin if you go back and watch earlier, because the light was right here from the sun coming in, and it was harsh light. You know, even now with the sun setting, if I go and put this down, it gets less. If I turn off my second monitor, it softens. Now we have highlights on my nose and stuff. So if I go and turn down the brightness on my screen, now we're actually accentuating the eyes because I'm getting the reflecting catch lights from the screen, but we're not getting all of that. It's still a little bit on my nose because my nose is closer. So if we come down even further, like now we're underexposed. But you get the idea that it's a softer light. So nice, even light. Umbrellas are really good for it. If you have the ability to bounce light, that's really helpful. With men, you can do a lot with split lighting. With women, you don't really want to. So the general rule that tends to be flattering for everyone is 45. 45 degrees to one side and 45-degree angle from above so that it's coming down on them. It's enough to get the catch lights, and it accentuates and it softens the light across their whole face. So you don't want to do 2, 3, 4 light setups and move it around. The other thing to do is to balance the light with either a reflector. So the same way that we were showing before with the lighter colors, it looks totally different if I add that second light in and how that changes, and then bringing just a notebook even, as opposed to, see the shadow on my face?
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you're doing that with wrinkles, when you turn, let's turn this one way down so that you can see it from the side. So because of the lines right now, you can see my forehead lines very well because the light is coming from this source and creating the shadows. So by having the reflecting lights, see how they don't show up on this side of my face? Yeah. So having the reflecting, shooting them in a room that's white, and having even light that fills in the shadows. Now the downside of that is that the more light that you have from other sources, the less tonality and structure you're going to have. So we may have gotten rid of my wrinkles, but if I have light underneath here where I'm looking, and we're going from this angle, I'm losing all the shadow on my jaw. So now my jaw is really wide and very masculine and maybe even double chinned. It starts to look like a double chin because of where the shadow placement goes. So this is camera angle too, but having the light above and to the side here is much more flattering because it creates the shadow under my chin. And so it creates separation from my chin and my neck. As opposed to if I'm up here and we're shooting, because the light now, because of the angle, the light can get under here, so it can accentuate. So it's putting a shadow under the chin bone, and then another shadow back here. And you can see as I'm talking that shadow moving because of the muscles in my neck. So you can see that moving back and forth. But it gives the illusion of a double chin that I don't necessarily have, or it's warning me that I should go to the gym more often. One of the two. You know, but that's the accentuation. So if you're working with somebody that does have a double chin, you know, the way to pull that out, if I wanted to have a double chin, said no one ever, you know, squishing your face back, it's very easy to add it. It's very attractive. This is what I had to look forward to in a couple of years. So if I wanted to take that out and I had this extra weight here, the more you pull forward, again, that accordion thing, the more you're getting rid of that. Now, as we're looking up, because the light's getting under here, it's still not accenting. So if you have your client come forward and down, because it's creating so much separation, and you have a plane of existence here, that is your jawline, and the next plane of existence is back here. So from here to here, look at how much space you're putting. So they'll feel really stupid when they do it, but essentially what you're doing is when people have extra weight and it starts to carry around their faces, what you're doing is you're shortening the length between this and here. So by stretching that out, we're elongating it, and then by coming forward and down. So they feel kind of like a turtle, like coming out of its shell, and you would look really stupid from the side. Like nobody would want to look like this. But when you turn it forward, it creates the line of the jaw, even if they don't necessarily have one. So a lot of times, like if I'm working with girls that don't have a strong jawline or do have a double chin, you know, having them come forward, and I tell them, you're going to feel really stupid when you do this. But this is what I want you to do, is come forward with your chin and down, because it creates a really strong jawline as opposed to where they normally sit, which is like right here, which depending on the angle and as I'm moving, you can see that start to go like right where your vocal cords are, and you can feel them. Like it's not very strong. And so if you have that double chin, coming forward with your head and down makes a huge difference. And it's important to come forward with the whole chin. So you don't want them coming and like sling blading, you know, where they look like a fish. You know, but whatever's closest to the lens is what's largest, and whatever's furthest recedes. So if you have them bent forward at the waist, we've already slenderized their waist, and we've drawn attention to the chest, which is what everybody wants to look at anyway. So that's good. It's the same thing with the head. When you have them lean forward with the top of their head as opposed to just their jawline, because you can go forward and down, which is what everybody says, and it works. But look at how short my neck is now. Mm-hmm. If you have them lean forward with the top of their head where they're leaning forward, you're still getting that jawline, but you're keeping the length of the neck as opposed to just coming forward and down where I have no neck. Because necks are really long and slenderizing as well. So it makes a big difference. So it's really, really subtle things to tell someone to lean forward with the top of their head and down, and watch what it does to the whole structure of my face. Because I'm very round-faced. Like if you look at it, like I'm very square-faced. I don't have a very heart-shaped little girl face, but I can totally fake it in all of my pictures because I know that if I come forward with the top of my head, that it slenderizes the jaw. So do you see how like now it's like this as opposed to this? And all I'm doing is changing and leading with the top of my head. So it's those little understandings and things that make a difference. And people hear bits and pieces like chin forward and down. Everybody's like, oh, Sue Bryce's thing, chin forward and down. No, it's not. I have books from the 1950s on glamour photography with Marilyn Monroe talking about that. But if you don't understand why it works, then you don't understand why sometimes it doesn't work for you. So people are like, oh, chin forward and down. So you have people that are going like this, and you're like, well, why doesn't my image look like your image? Well, because the reason chin forward and down is not chin forward and down, it's leading with your head, which brings your chin down, which creates a triangle space as opposed to a square space, and allows you to still keep your long neck. So there are little things like that that make a lot of the difference in your posing and take a lot of time out of editing too. Otherwise, I'm taking her in Photoshop and like stretching her neck.
Can you do that in Photoshop?
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, you can do a lot. Like I did one in, it's somewhere on my YouTube page where I did like a double chin where she had it was like really bad. Like there was like no neck, you know. And this isn't, and she's a beautiful woman. And it was all posing. It was a new photographer working with it that didn't know what she was doing. So, you know, she's happy and she's hugging her so-and-so, but they just, everything she could do to shorten her body and make her wide. Like nobody, if I take a screenshot right now and put this on my profile on Tinder, nobody's like, oh man, I wanna get me some of that. It's like, hi, can I have some cake? You know, which is totally different than would you like to take me out? You know, and I didn't change anything. It's not like I put on 30 pounds in the last 2 minutes or took 30 pounds off. It's all just posing. But yeah, I can go in and you can do it one of two ways. But if I start with this, taking this to this in Photoshop is hours upon hours of work. So learning that somebody sitting like this is going to not accentuate them well, and just having them come forward and down gets rid of that, saves you a lot of time and a lot of energy. And time is money. So it's the same thing, you know. Learning to lean with your head also hides any of the neck shadows and lines here, so it's a really good way to take a lot of age off of somebody really quickly as well, you know. And then it's just little things like girls are always want to put their shoulders back, and there's an appeal to that. But we were talking earlier, one of the easiest ways to make somebody look skinny is to show their bones. Like that's what we do. We say, oh, you're all skin and bones, you know. And so having the girls come forward instead, this is one of the last places that can gain fat. Like even if you're dealing with someone that's 300-400 pounds, they carry it in their arms, in their stomach, in their legs, in their chest, you know, in their face, and maybe, but here, like your neck and your collarbone, you don't get a lot of fat on this. Like even if you are overweight, you can feel rib cage through if you touch someone. It's just not where you gain weight because you don't have a lot of muscle either. Like even if you're really muscular, especially for women, guys do when they work out their chest really hard, but like if you're sitting and touching, you can feel your collarbones and your chest bone and, you know, all the way through. So even if I'm working with someone that's 50, 100, 150 pounds overweight, if I have her come forward, I can fake a lot of slenderness because one, doing this is creating a triangle of space. I'm faking the lines because the girls have like the hourglass figure. So guys are like V's, like they come down to like the hips and then they go straight down, and girls are like in and out. So if I want to create that line, bringing her hands in between her legs creates a triangle of space with her arms that her stomach might not be mimicking if she's overweight. Doing that also adds the collarbone, and then lighting, you know, puts these in, and because we say, oh, she's all bones, as soon as you see the bones protruding, it automatically translates to you visually as skinny. So you can fake a lot of lost pounds that way, just by being able to showcase and move. And a lot of times it's asymmetry too. So I'm not necessarily going like this because then you look hunched and that's not attractive, but it's very easy for you to drop one shoulder and just pull one forward, you know, or do it the opposite way too and pull back and forward. And so you can just kind of play with these different body things, but you'll instantly look slender if we can see the bones protruding through. So a lot of times it's asymmetry and keeping things off center, and because of the way I'm doing that, because I'm leading with this shoulder and then pulling this one forward, I'm taking so much of my weight off. Like, let's see if I can accentuate this well. Where's my thing? So right now, sitting flat against the wall, my shoulders are like here and here. That's how wide my body's reading right now. If I come in this way and then pull through, because of the way that I'm turning, look at how much size I take off my body from where you were reading. I just took off inches. You know, it's the same thing. You know, if I'm reading here and you're reading the weight here, I'm almost, you know, I'm like an inch off the chair. If I turn to the side, one, we're accentuating the curves, and two, because I'm leaning forward, the way that it changes, it reads the body differently by the way that it's going, and it shows the different curves that you want while everything else recedes, which is why you always bend at the waist and then down with the head, so that we're accentuating what we want big and we're minimizing what we want small. And all of those, you can start to see repeating patterns. So collarbones lead in. You have this like heart shape to your chest between the bones and the cleavage. It's the same thing with the chin. So if we're mimicking that line and then we're mimicking that with the arms coming down, it's all inside lines that are repeating and showing slenderness and moving away. So it's just little subtle things. Any other questions? No, because I don't have another hour for you to answer.
No, I just wanted to say thank you, and I really enjoyed all the color stuff.
Good.
Well, I mean, it made me realize why I do a lot of close-ups of flowers, and it made me realize what I like. The ones that I particularly like have those qualities of you know, the color combinations. And
yeah, I think you know, I think there's always something when I'm learning about other styles of photography and other styles of art that I take back and apply to mine. So a lot of my photography comes from painting, but there's definitely classes I've sat in on from landscape or macro or floral and stuff like that that I can take back and apply. So it makes me happy to hear that you got something productive out of it, because this was really not geared towards you. You're not my target market. But I'm glad
I have children that are younger than you are, probably.
Well, no, I just mean in the sense of like education. Like, it's not one, you know, there aren't too many floral photographers that are like, oh yeah, I'll go spend 2 hours listening to someone talk about portraiture, because, you know, you're shooting flowers. So I think it's really good, and it shows a lot of potential to me with people that I'm watching when they learn. Sorry, I don't think you can hear me. I can't hear you, Anita. Are you talking? Oh, no. She is. You can type. Sorry. I'm glad you hung out, too. You were a trooper as well.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Jessica. This was great.
Good. I'm really in love with a lot of your Iceland shots, Chris. I just want to tell you, you've been sharing them, and I've been like, ooh.
I've got a lot more too that I need to just keep working on.
Awesome.
That's fun.
Mine are better.
It's true.
Well, I think what we're going to have to do is extend an honorary membership in, so you can come show some and show them up, because I would love to see some of your work too.
Bonnie, you should start. You could share them in the Focus Lounge.
Yeah.
You hang out in the Focus Lounge too, Jessica, right?
Yeah, I do. I'm in there, so yeah, you can share them in there and tag me. I would love to see them.
Okay, great.
It'd be awesome. Okay, I have to like be parent. They want to eat like every day. They're so demanding.
Yeah.
It was great to meet Katie, though. Katie. Kate?
Katie. Yeah, Cadence.
Cadence.
No, I'm just telling them your name. You don't have to do anything else. Just like, what?
She's a doll.
They said it's very nice to meet you.
Hi.
Tell her she makes great faces.
They said you make great faces.
That I do.
Thanks, Jessica.
All right,
Thank
I will
you.
talk to you guys soon, and I will see you
I
next.
sent you a message about having a hangout soon, so I'll let you look for that. In the level 21, I submitted my level 21 and a draft of my level 22.
Awesome.
I'd love to have some feedback.
Okay, sounds good. I will check them out. I'm in for the rest of the night. I have a meeting with the higher ups, and then we're done. I'm going to stop